Call this workshop to order. Notice of a workshop, March 26, 2025 at 5 p.m. City Council Chamber, 3947 Lincoln Avenue in Groves, Texas. You'd all rise for the prayer and pledge. Dear Heavenly Father, we ask that you guide us in tonight's meeting and have us have open minds and open hearts and to do what is best for this city and in your resemblance and how you would like it to be done. And we ask that you pray for us and pray for all of our citizens and all of our first responders and city employees. And we thank you for the beautiful weather again. In your name we pray. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, City Clerk.
Warren.
Here.
Vice President Canitas.
Here.
Councilmember McAdams.
Here.
Councilmember Holmes.
Here.
Councilmember McGinn.
I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's work session. Item 6 will be any reports.
I would just like to say thank you to the mayor and council for agreeing to meet for 3 nights in a row. I know that it seems a lot of your time after work. I appreciate that.
Okay, I'll make a blanket statement before we get started. I'd like to remind everybody of the rules of decorum. You know, feel free to speak. I'd also like to say that I think I speak for everyone, and I'm going to address the entire room. No one in this room or on this council wants to pay higher taxes. No one wants to pay higher water bills. No one wants to drive on bad streets, and no one wants to not be able to flush their toilet. So we all understand that no one wants to do these things, but it is our job that we've been tasked with is to find a way to get better streets, find a way to fix our sewer systems, and to do it with the least impact on the citizens as possible. It's not always pretty and it's never fun, but these are the things that we have to do. We'll move on to citizen comments. Come to the podium, state your name and address, please.
My name is Ronald Wallace. I live at 4210 Grant Avenue, Groves, Texas. I've lived in Groves for 70 years. I'm 70 years old. As you all know, like you said, Mayor, the roads in Groves are the worst that I've ever seen. Me personally, I'm speaking for myself only. I feel, and I have no problem paying tax to improve the roads. For one, is as long as that tax is designated and the money cannot be touched other than for road improvements. 2 is, I feel that if you're going to repair any roadway in Groves, that one, you need to take a look at the records on the water system in that, under that roadway, the sewer system under that roadway, and especially the drainage. If those 3 things are not addressed, you build a brand new road on it, then it's just going to fall apart. Not the first year, maybe the second year, may take a couple of years, but when you have the substructure problems, then it's going to hamper the roadway and cause it to fail. Another thing is, if you do decide to do some roadways, would you please address the roads that intersect the ones that you work on? Me personally, I live 2 blocks from a couple of streets. The crossword roads were taken care of. They were rebuilt and there's pretty well standing up. I had a problem with transitions from those roads because they go to my power. And I asked for transitions to be put on those roads, so we didn't have a problem with our vehicles crossing the road. Well, it can't, and a transition with the height that it was built needs to be, my experience, about 20 feet long, transitioning down to the existing road. The transitions that were put in there were anywhere from 3 to 4 foot long. Okay. I had a problem again, I addressed that again with the city. And their answer was they came out, put up signs that there was an elevated road ahead. And they changed the stop signs from Grand Avenue being thoroughfare to where you had to stop before you got to it and let the other roadway be the thoroughfare. That was an answer to the problems that was created. So all in all, I would like to be able to see that when things are addressed, that you take a look at everything, make sure the money stays for the roadways. If you need taxes, sewer system, you'll do that already, the water system. And repair those items before you repair the roadways. That's basically all I have.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other citizen comments? Name and
My-
address, please.
Marcus Salazar, live at 649 Carroll Street. So a couple of things. I'm not privy to how long everybody here has been on the city council. I know that we've got a relatively few people here, so I'm not gonna sit up here and pretend it's like all of you guys' fault that this is happening. But I have the first question that immediately comes to mind when I saw that this was happening. Taxing the citizens is one thing, but how, I mean, so on 649 Terrell, I have a big giant school behind my house now, that I did vote for. But I understand why you would need something like that, but in order to build that school, what was a moderately damaged road before became severely damaged by 2 straight years of cement trucks and dump trucks going up and down my road right in front of my house, because that's the way my gate is, or my driveway is directly next to the gate them trucks were driving in and out of for the better part of 2 years. So I'm being taxed for my road being torn up and get repaid, which I would love to have happen, but I'm not necessarily the one that tore it up. And because of that school, the same issue, we had our drainage system reworked on Carroll Street and the surrounding areas. They filled in the big ditch next to my house. Okay. So when they were cutting holes in the road to fix the drainage system, they redid my ditch in front of the house. Okay. The repair could not have been any worse. To the point that I told the guy, like, hey man, you gonna fix that? Because I don't know, car trying to be able to get in and out of the driveway. But none of them really care. So that's point number one, is that I mean, I am 37. I haven't lived here for as long as some of the people in this room. But a 37-year-old for the better part of my life, almost all of it, I live in Groves. And I think most people here would agree that Main Avenue is probably the worst it's ever been, at least since I've been alive. I go to Market Basket quite often. And the stretch from my house to Market Basket is terrible, and you go all the way to Hoggaboom. Secondarily to that, on the subject of Hoggaboom, how do you go about, we don't get any tax revenue from, say, Enderon, because they're not in Groves. But the road that their heavy hauls go through is in Groves. Are we going to get tax revenue from Indorama's heavy haul? I mean, that's a good way to increase the tax revenue, and not put it all on the shoulders of the citizen. Now, if I read that spreadsheet on my computer there correctly, our budget the 25 million, that's the proposed budget for 24-25 or something to that effect. In my line of work, I deal with budgets, that amount and more quite often. I'm in the utility industry. And it's not necessarily always on the person that needs to bear the burden. But that there's other players involved, like. I wouldn't expect somebody like Maria's Diner, everybody in here is a fan of Maria's Diner, to bear the tax burden for everything when there's a giant corporation just one town over using our roads to get to their equipment, right? The other issue I have is, or it's not really an issue, it's more of a question. I know this is a comment section, it's more of a question. When you conduct something to this scale, or propose to conduct something on this scale, you know, repaving the entire city, hopefully. What is the transparency gonna be like on how are you guys gonna decide when and where it gets fixed first? How would the council or whomever decide on, is there going to be a bid process? Is there gonna be more than one contractor that's gonna come through? And do we get to see that? I would assume that there's more than one contractor that would be willing to repave our roads, and I don't necessarily want the cheapest work to. That gentleman right there's, doing it correctly is better than doing it very cheaply, at least in my industry. But, there needs to be a competitive bid process, I would hope. That. Probably gonna happen.
We're not gonna answer questions. This is your comment section.
Okay.
We're not gonna have a back and forth at this.
Fair enough. That's really all my comments. I just want some type of transparency to the city on how this is gonna come about, because I assume if we're having a discussion about increasing tax to the citizens, that it's probably a foregone conclusion at this point. But I think it would benefit, it would probably settle at least some of the citizens down to know that there's going to be a formal process. And that we're not gonna be the only ones that's gonna have to bear the burden of that. That the other people in the city of Groves, they're not necessarily citizens, they just work here or use our roads to get back and forth. Would actually have to pitch into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizen comments? Name and address.
Good afternoon, Brandon Scott, 6132 Washington. One thing that I have been noticing, of course, with the transition of our national government is the Department of Government Efficiency, which I've been a huge fan of. One thing that I did speak with Councilmember Holmes about, and one of the reasons why my wife and I thought very hard for wanting to see, was the transparency that we talked about. Looking on the Doge website, seeing what everything's been allocated for and finding all the savings. That is something that I would like to see happen with here. To where we can see what all these allotted funds have been voted for, approved for, and where they're going into. Something there where we can actually put fiscal eyes on it versus just trusting blindly, which obviously has not worked in the past. Thank you.
Any other citizen comments? Last call, citizen comment.
Hello, Scott, 6132 Washington, same as Madison. I just wanted to kind of throw this out there. Senior citizens, fixed incomes, are there going to be any allocations for them to have some kind of exemption? The ones that have lived here, paid for their houses, they don't travel as much. They've already endured the water increase. Also how we're going to prioritize the roads. Washington, Lincoln were perfectly good roads, and they decided to repave them for some reason, and they're crappier than they ever were. So are we going to just fill potholes? Are we going to prioritize and actually replace roads with good working order roads? I would rather see my tax dollars, because I know we have at least 10 years here in Groves. I love living in Groves. I chose to move to Groves. But I want to see my tax dollars go to a road system that's going to last. I don't want to see Band-Aid. And I think that's everybody here. And everybody here also, what we see in the Facebook comments and in the groups and in talking with the community is the transparency issue. Are these taxes really going to go to the roads? That's what we really want. And I think that would go a long way. I know we have an uphill battle being overcome past. And we pushed really hard to get a lot of people to pass. And we keep it for sure. So I think we just really want to see the transparency.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Catherine White, 2321 Nottingham. My concern is if we do the taxation for the citizens, how long will this continue to go on? Is it ongoing forever? Or once we get the roads fixed, will this stop? It's just my concern. I just wanted to bring it forth to the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Citizen comments. Last call, citizen comments. All right, move on. Item number 8, be deliberate on the condition of city streets and potential means to improve and maintain them, including adding a transportation user fee. Mr. Ruth, you have the floor.
Mayor and council, we invited New Gen Strategies and Solutions, so Matthew Garrett, who also did our rate study for utilities, to come tonight and present on transportation user fee. Also have Public Works Director Troy Foxworth also present here. He comes up to the podium, talk about the kind of history and the need, and then Matthew will follow up with a deep dive into the actual transportation user fee. So, Troy?
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council, for letting me come here to speak. Thank you for the comments too. As you will see, hopefully with this presentation that you guys, a lot of your questions will be answered. First of all, I love working for the city. The community, you can see the concerns they have. It's awesome. They want to get together and do something to make the streets better. And I really do appreciate that. So you can see up here, he's got a slide up here that shows we have 182 streets totaling 74 miles, I say 75 miles to maintain. We had an evaluation study done in 2017, and it shows, I can read it for you, or you can look at it yourself, but we have all this information over here. But I kind of want to go over some history of the city itself and my part. I've been here 20 years, okay? So I've been a part of this, start off in water and sewer, moved up to where I'm at right now. So cities funded these streets programs through sources. It's the general fund is what funds the streets program. We've also tapped into some grants that we had. It was federal and state grants. And so to show you right now, these streets right here, this is what's been done since 2018 till now. You can see it has a diagram over on the side, which ones were done from the streets program, our streets program, and then you have the ones that were done through General Land Office, through Harvey Fund, through the COVID relief, excuse me, COVID relief fund. A lot of the streets are done. We do try for these grants throughout the years. A lot of times though, when we do, or actually most of the time when we do these grants, they're limited. So you can see the area down here that's past 73 to the LMI, which is low to moderate income. So we're kind of limited on how we can spend these funds. So even when we do get a grant, it doesn't get to be spent all over the city. So I just want the citizens to be aware that we do go out for grants. And we have companies that help us do that as well. So currently, and I want everybody to be aware also that you can go online and look at the budget. It has been presented online. You can see how much money is in our budget for the streets and drainage program, for the streets and drainage department itself, and shows everything, general fund and all that. So right now, the streets fund has $1.47 million budgeted for the fiscal year 2024-2025. What that covers is the operations, the general maintenance of streets and drainage, not just streets, the streets and drainage. This includes filling potholes, minor street repairs, storm drains, regrading ditches, setting culverts, for driveways, resetting culverts, fixing cave-ins, things like that. It's your general maintenance on the streets. And out of this, we're supposed to be able to rebuild streets as well. So if you look at that budget, we also have to pay our employees, all this stuff too. So this right here is what your tax money goes to. This is the general fund. Okay. And I hear comments that say all the time about how I pay my taxes, I want my streets better. Well, you can see where the streets are coming from, that little small section over there. And like I said, this city is a small city. Love working for this city. And I love the fact that you see how much is coming for the police department right here. I know for a fact that whenever I call the police, they're gonna come up there and help me. Every one of you guys can agree to that. We have one of the lowest crime rates in the area. Okay, and it's awesome to be able to have this fire, same thing, within minutes, they're gonna be there to put your fire out to help you, whatever. So this is how much money comes out of the general fund going to these other departments. Whereas streets, you have a smaller section of the pie right here. Okay. You get into all the numbers and stuff down here, but he has it for you. For the emergency services, it's 92.5% of the general fund. So the rest of the general fund is split between everybody else. There's not much money there for streets.
But just to be clear, it's 92.5% of the ad valorem taxes
Yes,
that we get, not a total general fund.
Okay. So I just wanted this graphic to be up there so you guys can see where that money is actually coming from. And whenever you're here, I do pay my taxes. Yes, it's covering mostly police and fire when we get down to it. Streets is a very small portion of that. But I don't want to get rid of more police, and I don't want to get rid of more fire. So we're trying to create some money right there. We could cut costs in other places, but where? So in the past, the streets were typically rebuilt or chip sealed on a worst first rotation. So worst streets, we fix them first. We also use traffic volumes that played a large part. How many trucks, cars, whatever drove down these streets. That's how we determine which streets were repaired first. So sometimes we'd rebuild it completely, or we just do a seal coat. When somebody mentioned about Lincoln, that was a seal coat. That was to try to preserve the street that was already there. Had we not done that, it would have got worse. I know it's not the most preferred idea of how to do a street. That is a chip seal street. It's not the smoothest, but it is to preserve that street so it doesn't get any worse. So the city employees in the past were able to rebuild most of the streets ourselves in-house. We had the equipment and we had the expertise. So the city also had an interlocal agreement with Jefferson County, and they would assist us on the chip seal. We would go do the base work. They would come in and they would lay the chips on top of the street. Sometimes we would have an asphalt company come in and they would do the hot mix on top. By doing it this way, it gave the city the ability to repair and rebuild more streets at a lower cost. Like for a great example, when we built Monroe Street, I know you guys remember that was around 2020, 2021. It was a 2-year process. So for the base work, we did all the base work ourselves. It costed a total of right around, I don't have the exact numbers, but it was $212,000. It was base material, it was around $200,000. About $12,000 for rental of some equipment that we don't own anymore. This equipment was also used that year for other projects. The following year, we hired a contractor to lay the asphalt of the hot mix, and that price was around $280,000. So which gave us a total of, well, first of all, the street was right under a mile, and it was about 34 feet wide, and that gave us a total of $492,000. So it cost to do that one street. So we look at our budget, we'll back up to that $1.47 million. And that one street, 2 years, it cost us almost $500,000. Okay, so the general fund also includes the replacement of our city-owned equipment. You can see on that last slide that we had, it showed the garage. They would repair our equipment. They also, if we had to buy new equipment, it would come out of this fund as well. So, well, as time went on, when I started here at the city 20 years ago, the equipment that we had then is the same equipment we have now to this day. It's past its prime. We needed new equipment. We asked for replacement, and because of budget constraints, I get it. We could not afford to pay for the new equipment to do the same job that we were doing back in the past. So we repaired our equipment, but it's got to a point where when we were actually doing Monroe Street, one of our pieces of equipment actually died in the middle of the street. We had to throw it off and borrow another piece. Luckily, we have a good relationship with other cities. With outdated equipment and the lack of experience, because a lot of the guys have retired, and without building streets every year, we just don't have the experience that we had. Without that, we are not able to build all the streets like we wanted to, or we can, or we used to be able to. I'm sorry. So we're going to have to hire contractors to do most of the work, if not all of it, on the rebuild of the streets, and we still do our patching and things like that with the employees that we have right now. Excuse me. So like I said before, as of 2017, the pavement assessment study that we had done, we had 75 or 74 point so many miles of roadway. That was based on the assessment. Let's see, the city, they had an idea at the time to do 10% of those roads, which was roughly 7 miles. And this is what he has up here on this. Shows the different levels of it. But the main idea was to try to get the 7 miles done, and it was more of the hot mix. During that time in 2017, the cost of that would have been $3.6 million to improve the pavement conditions. Today, you see the price right here. If you look at the third road, $5.7 million for that same exact project. That's what it would cost us today. So that's the kind of money that we're going to need if we're going to continue that assessment and repair 10% of the roads every year. That's the kind of money we need. That's today. It may get more. It may be more. So with those numbers in mind, did a little calculation on it. The same street we did on Monroe, we did 5 years ago. If we were to do that same street today, granted, we can't build the street like we used to because of our equipment. It's just we don't have the equipment anymore, or the manpower. That street today would cost us $1.32 million, where 5 years ago we did it for $192,000. So city's got a choice to make. I mean, it sounds to me like they're kind of on board on doing something better for the streets, which I appreciate that. If we repair our streets or not, I believe everybody wants to have better streets to ride on. So if we want to repair these, we've got to fund them, and there's sources we could tap into. We could either do like a bond, or we could do what Mr. Garrett's going to come up here in a few minutes, and he's going to explain this. It's not a tax; it is a fee. So that's a misconception. People think it's a tax. It's not really that. It is a fee, and I don't know 100% what it involves, but I do know that it will be based on a study that they're going to do to show us a way that we can make this fair for everybody.
Troy, just to stop you for a second, just so we're clear, these proposed numbers, this is just for the street. This doesn't take into account anything that has to be repaired underneath the street, water, city, or sewer, any of that stuff. So those would still have to be considered in the total price.
Correct.
So that, like Mr. Wallace had stated, that we're not redoing things as we do.
Yes.
So this is just a street cost, not a total repair cost.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate his comments too. I've worked with him in the past. You know what I'm talking about. So where were we? Okay. Let's see. This fee that we're talking about, it's going to be separate. Whatever the money that comes in, it's going to be separate. It's going to only be spent on the streets, from my understanding. You do this fee, it only is able to be spent on that. It's just like the water bills. Whenever they have water bills, that pays for water and sewer. It doesn't pay for streets. You don't have any streets repaired out of water bills. I'm sorry, they're water meters. Also, like your solid waste, or you pay your garbage bill, that doesn't pay for streets either. Each thing pays for itself. So this will not be affected by your tax dollars. It will be a fund separate from that. So that's
Mr. Crew, just to be clear. If this was to be put in place, would the intent be to create a debt service and then have the fee pay the debt service for a larger project over a period of time?
I think we would want to, depending on what the study comes back and we, council decides what kind of fees would be, we'd see what the revenue stream would be. You'd probably want to reserve some of that for annual maintenance, but then the bulk of it would probably be for a debt service.
And the thought and process behind a debt service would be to establish a construction project that would repair roads right now and then be paid for over a length of time. In doing so, potentially allowing the people that are paying for it right now to enjoy some of the spoils created by the debt service construction work.
The people that are paying for it and essentially consuming the streets would be paying for it, correct?
Rather than creating the savings account and saving up for 10 to 15 years and then doing it all at once.
Right.
Later on down the line.
Correct.
okay. Before I bring Mr. Garrett up here, I just wanted to end on this. Small community. I know we need work done on the streets. I mean, nobody's gonna pay for these streets except for us here in the city. Port Arthur won't pay for our streets, Port Neches, Neyland, Bridge City, none of these places are gonna pay for our streets. We're gonna have to pay for them ourselves. We take pride in our city, right? So this could be a great idea. I believe in it. And I would say I wouldn't wait on it. It's just streets are only gonna get just patch. The budget that we have right now, all we can do is the same thing we've been doing for the past year. We won't be able to build any new streets, so. I don't have anything else, so I'm gonna go ahead and bring up Garrett, Mr. Garrett. You can come up here and you're gonna explain the transportation fee and its details.
Thank you, sir. Howdy, Mayor, members of council, Matthew Garrett with Nugent Strategies and Solutions. Pleasure to be back in front of you again. So a great tee up, and again, I'll echo Troy. I appreciate the citizens being here and their comments. I'll try not to answer them for the council, but some of those questions may be answered through the course.
Oh, you can answer them all you want now. We just couldn't do it a while ago.
Fantastic. So again, your situation, background, you've already heard from Troy. There's 20 years. I heard from a gentleman with 70 years. So I can't go that deep, but I can tell you background from my knowledge is this is not uncommon. You're not alone. There are a lot of cities that are underfunding their infrastructure, and you're not alone behind the dais of dealing with effectively riding the good times until it got bad enough that it's going to be costly to fix, and it's your decision on the council. So I don't envy that task either, but you did have that pavement condition assessment. I like a pavement condition index. It's a number. And so I think that would behoove the council. You get to choose a numeric expression of the city's desired level. So I have cities that have a high expectation and cities with a low. So one use of these funds, should it come to bear, is you could have a pavement condition assessment done, which will help you then, as the audience has asked, prioritize the roads, right? But additionally, you could then peg, we want a funding plan that achieves X number on this scale, and then we can figure out the cost and see if we can afford it, right? So that assessment didn't give me an index, but I will say that's a handy, useful tool. Lastly, I already heard the expression worst first. Worst first isn't just worst road, but worst and the beneficial sort of utilitarian approach. If 4 people are rolling across a road monthly, it may not get attention for a while, right? If the same level of road has thousands, it's the worst, even if the condition is the same, right? It's affecting more people. I think we all get that. I think that was a question posed by your residents. That's inherent to all the studies that I've seen done. Last disclaimer before we get into sort of nuts and bolts calculations, I'm not an engineer. And that means I won't be selling you design work or constructing these roads or PMing this project. So I don't have a vested interest in necessarily the city's end game. But I know every engineering house I've worked with looks at a number of dimensions to help prioritize, and that's informed by you and sometimes a group of citizens, so. You can go ahead and go to the next if you would. So what could you do, right? You could designate a portion of sales tax, you could increase tax rates, and these are things that are at the druthers of council, subject to voter approval rates. You could look at a utility. You have several other utilities. What's unique about a utility, as referenced previously, is their fee base. Fees have to have a rational nexus, right? Fees are effectively set aside into a special fund, and that special fund is designated for certain uses. So as a result, that would address some of the audience questions. If we're going to pay a transportation fee, will it be used for roads? The answer to that is yes, because it must be, because you're going to create via ordinance some utility with effectively a charter, not a city charter, sorry, with a purpose, and the funds would then be restricted to that purpose. I've seen that purpose defined as curb to curb, literally. I've seen it defined as sidewalk to sidewalk, because it's part of a transportation need. So it can include bike lanes, or it can include a little beautification. But theoretically, you could do any number of things around the road, but the dollars would be spent there, right? So that's pretty straightforward. That's why we're looking at a fee. That's what the utility would do. But to create a utility that has revenue, we have to have a basis. And so we can look at this, unlike property taxes, it would be dedicated to support transportation needs. Also, I won't go deep on this, but unlike property taxes, everyone that uses the road could pay. You have a number of organizations in this city that are tax exempt, many of which use the roads, some heavily. So that's another opportunity for fairness around a utility. Just as the city's not giving away free water because someone's you wouldn't have to exempt them from this utility. Okay, if you go to the next, this isn't unique. City of Austin has a relatively high fee at $17.87. They have a number of fees in Austin, and so they're topping the charts for us right now. City of Bryan increased to 12. Sulphur Springs, Colleen, we did support them in their creation of this utility. It's now been up for a while. Lampasas, Kingsville, Border, Corpus, Hutto, and Waco.
Mr. Gerhart,
Yes.
is this a monthly, weekly,
Oh, I apologize.
yearly?
Sorry, this is the monthly transportation fee paid by a resident.
Right, a household.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's a flat fee.
Yes. Yeah, and so you'll see to the left, it goes by several names. If one were to query or search for themselves, it could be a transportation utility fee, it could be a street maintenance fee, it could be a roadway maintenance fee or thoroughfare. A lot of synonyms around roads, but it goes by a couple names, but you'll find it in these communities, and I trust there are others. Unlike water rates or even drainage rates that are more prevalent around the state, this one's catching a little more traction, but there aren't hundreds that I know of to put on the slide for you. So you have a wide range of fees there, so I'm not going to say where you would land. It depends on your needs and billing potential. But if you'll go to the next slide, our methodology, and this is kind of how the watch is made. So forgive me, please give me one of these, Mayor, if I need to, or you guys interject and ask any questions as we go. But obviously, we would have to assess and access trip generation data, right? And so we'll talk about each of these, so I won't read it all to you. We'll create some simplified land use categories. We have to assign the non-residential parcels to one of these categories. And then ultimately we end up with a designation of total trips generated by the uses in your city. Now, if you'll go to the next, please. So first, access trip generation data. We would do that through the ITE manual. You can go ahead and go to the next. So there's a trip generation manual. This is promulgated or published rather by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. This is the same source used in the subject cities above, probably others, but I know it is for them, so I put it on there for you. We do use that. It does have a data set based on their surveying around number of trips by not just industry code, but also by specific land uses. So we'll look at a few examples as we get deeper. To show you some contrast. There are quite a few of them, so I'm not going to talk about all of them tonight. But ultimately, within that same sample, you can take a reading at midnight and you're going to get different trip generation factors, right? You can take a reading on Sunday and hopefully churches are going to have a higher rate. right? Generally, the traffic differs based on time of day, based on days chosen. We very frequently see weekdays, and that's what this last bullet talks about. We would look at the sample for weekdays from 4 to 6 p.m. And that would be the assumed sample survey data used to inform the trips generated by a given business type. Does that make sense? That's not a have to, that's a norm in our practice. So the manual does give us more options, and we could explore those if that was something staff wanted to entertain or the council wanted to see. You can go ahead and go to the next one, sir. So we want to create some simplified land use categories. If you have, you can go to the next. We have 167 possible land uses. And so you can imagine how gray the line gets between businesses, and we'll look at hotel motels in a minute, and that'll be one example. But we would probably group those into no more than 50, maybe 70 at most. The last one I did was 67, because that city wanted to have 67 discrete uses to assign a given business or even a residential unit to, right? Again, we're not differentiating residential around single family standalone structures, but there are differences in apartments versus condos versus duplexes and triplexes and quads. And the manual has some of that. And so we can determine to lump them together or we can leave them independent, right? And so we'll look at some more grouping. So this is an important step. This is kind of the basis by which our team would go and classify as we look at land uses throughout your city. And we would effectively create their trip generation based on the assigned category. Here's that example. And so in the IT manual, you have a hotel, all suites hotel, business hotel, motel, or resort hotel. And I've stayed at some places. I don't know that I know what each of those places falls into. I know the one because they charged a lot, but I don't do resorts often. But I would say that it would be prudent to lump those together so you don't have to differentiate. That challenge is mine if I do this study for you once. It's your staff's for the next time, right? Someone has to go in and assess for the next permit, for the changed tenant, or the changed use of a given structure. What is it? How is it going to impact our roadway? This isn't especially administratively burdensome, but I'd rather they have one category for hotel motel than 5, if that makes sense. Last note, if we were to do this, we would recommend that everything be referenced not as the trip gen factor, because the manual publishes a proper factor, but rather as the single family equivalent, right? And so it's a scaling issue. If the single family is actually a 0.9, then we would ratchet that up to a 1 so that the fees set for the resident become the multiplier, right, for the other setting. So it's just easier to explain if the unit is not a textbook trip gen factor, but the Groves single family equivalent rate. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you looked at those, you may not find those equal to the manual. They've been adjusted for a single family equivalent. But go ahead. Thank you. So how do we identify non-residential parcels? That would be easy, right? It should be, but it's not always. So we would actually have to go through and look at the residential properties. We can certainly use the utility billing data. We can certainly look at non-residential from the appraised roll through your county appraisal district. Forgive me. But that said, we may have to further differentiate, and then you can go ahead and advance to the next. So here's a map for one of the clients we worked with recently. Some of these communities or parcels had to be manually identified and picked up. Effectively, they were missing. I don't think we have that here in Groves, but in this particular community, we had multiple water providers. And so the water bill was sent by someone else. So I didn't have a bill to tell me exactly what's there. And it didn't tell me exactly who was occupying it. So it took a little more of a lift. But this is just an example. Effectively, we would identify every parcel. We'd link that up to the appraisal district's number convention, right, which is a property ID or parcel ID. We would then assign that to one of these designated land uses. You can go to the next. And that's where we are now. We're going to assign these parcels to land use categories. Right. Again, we'd recommend that foundationally, before we even start evaluating, we've defined the menu. Right. Not 167 that get effectively assigned and then pared down yet again. But pared down to the what do we want to have list and then assign from that grouping. Non-residential parcels, we actually use Google Streets. I have a lot of really qualified people, and this is one of their tasks where they say, really, I needed my degree for this? I said, no, but you need to get on there and figure out how many pumps the gas station has. Figure it out. And so we have a team of folks that do that because that's the unit gas stations are built for. That again is identified by the ITV manual. So you see, we have single family would be one dwelling, duplex we could assume two, multifamily is by the manual, assuming one dwelling per 1,000 square feet. 1,000 square feet is sort of a common measure applied to commercial properties. It helps scale. Let's say the Exxon, well, that's a bad example. It helps scale Tractor Supply from the old Ace Hardware. All right, for instance, they're both the same, but the size of it may generate more traffic, even if you're selling the same product. Okay. And you can go ahead and do that. We then ultimately calculate for all of these parcels that have all been put into one of 50 to 70 categories and evaluated for the potential uses. Again, you'll see the variable that gets evaluated. Pretty simple for single family, it's each 1 to 1. A duplex is per dwelling. Real estate office is 1,000 square feet. We have to assess from the appraisal district the square footage, right, of the improvement. And sometimes we have to differentiate the square footage of pavement from the conditioned space, right? So there's a little nuance, but ultimately we grab that. The measure for hotels per room makes sense, right? More rooms, more cars. And then gas station, I've already alluded to, literally is counting the pumps. And occasionally we need boots on the ground. Perhaps someone from Troy's team could double check us if we miscounted the pump, right? So that is in a nutshell how we get from what you see when you drive through your roads and the billing system and your appraisal district to a billing potential, right? This is like building a new customer base. Who are they? We have to identify them. How do we build them? We let the manual dictate. And what is their total is dependent on their variable. Does that make sense? Okay. Fantastic. So this is a subject city that we worked with. So I just pulled this out as an example. These are the total trips. Again, when I do billing, I always want some sort of standard billing unit. So these are single family equivalents. In this community, the residential group made up 10,854 units in that city. You'd see general retail, gas station, supermarkets make up quite a bit in the higher category, and then libraries and mobile home parks and even the hotels in this community didn't make up a lot of units. And so this would be the result, not yours, this was theirs, but you may have a very similar, pretty easy to identify residential count. And then we'd have a group of other categories. If you took the sum of that entire stack chart, you would have effectively what would be generated for $1 per month, right? And then that times 12 would give you an annual budget potential. Less some collections and less some assumptions that we're going to miss a few or correct some things. But even with that high bar in this community of residential, you'll see to the left, it still makes up less than 40% of the total. So the sum of all those little blue bars is substantially more than the residential class. I venture a guess, and I haven't compared it yet, but if you looked at your certified appraised roll, you probably have more value in your residential properties than you do in your commercial properties. What that means is every penny in property tax, you're getting more from residents than commercial. I believe, and I haven't assessed it yet, I believe that would be slightly reversed if this were reviewed. You can go to the next, if you will. So again, once a $1 fee of revenue is identified, we can all multiply from there, right? If we got one per month, if we looked at one project, we could certainly look at that. So the question of what do we fund with it? You know, debt service is a great opportunity. The city also has an INS tax rate. Should you want to flex your debt service, you have that component. I have some communities that say leave the debt in the property tax, leave the cash funded capital maintenance year to year in this new generated fee. And again, I don't anticipate this fee is going to cover all of your current expenses. I'm assuming from what I'm hearing in the room and from staff's feedback, this fee would be for additional funds to do more than we're doing today, right? This isn't just to move how we fund it. This is to get more. So you have opportunities to make those choices. I think agreeing with Kevin on this one, you definitely don't want to make all of this fund debt service. Because it really starts to lose its value year 3, right? Everyone's still paying the fee and they're like, what are we getting for this? Oh, that project. Remember they finished it last year. And we're gonna pay that for 20 years. Right, so there's a good reason not to have this fee just isolated to debt, but a substantial portion would certainly be assigned to it. Last note, this is a utility, right? Utilities are supposed to pay for themselves. Utilities are supposed to be managed in a way that over the long term, you're not paying more, right? I think we talked about the cost of things, but there's actually a cost per year, right? If you go in with concrete, you might get more. You might get more years of useful life without maintenance. And that total dollar impact may not be the same as the initial cost, right? It's like buying the plastic basketball goal versus the shatterproof glass, right? One's going to be sun-worn in 2 years, and I have to do something about it, and the other's going to be there until my grandkids play on it, right? So those are the choices you have with your spend. But I do think you look at every budget cycle, just like your utility rates. That doesn't mean you have to change the fee every year. Maybe it generates $2 million and that's all you need. And that's, you let it ride for years. But the cost of those projects aren't gonna go down. So there's a great chance you should evaluate this and let it rise, at least with inflation, if you want to start a fee that funds some level of effort and improves service and also continues to do so in future years. So those are my 2 cents on the study, and I think we have one more slide. If I was to help, or any other firm, it doesn't need to be NewGen, but if we were to help look at this and do a feasibility, there are more steps. So after we've set the stage, we've determined total billing potential, there are steps, and I don't want to shortchange you and tell you it's all magic afterwards. We now have an Excel spreadsheet that tells us we're going to make money. We do not have a billing system ready to set the bill. Right? So there's a step for your staff, possibly with our team, to make sure that gets out right. There's certainly change management effort and public communication. Perhaps y'all will handle all of that. Letting people know this is coming. There's education plan, as you see. Lastly, you would need to adopt an ordinance establishing the utility and adopt an ordinance establishing the fee. So there are examples. I see your city attorney, he may have examples. Firm may have examples. So it won't be uncharted territory, but it's a step, a hoop to jump through. I think that's it. I'm glad to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Garrett.
Yes, sir.
So on a city our size, I think we're like 9,000, 9,900, something like that on houses, residents.
We have about 7,000
7,000.
active users.
How long would that assessment we were talking about generate the index? How long would something like that take, this project, this assessment?
Sure. It does. Sure. I hate to venture a guess because I don't know what the data looks like. I don't think I've worked with your appraisal district yet. And that varies throughout the state. There are 254 of them and 254 different versions of data, it seems. So if that's clean, and I have seen some have the same system, but if that's clean, that would be much easier. But I haven't assessed that yet, so that could be a stumbling block. Additionally, I don't know, I haven't asked, if you actually have land use zoning across properties and a shapefile that could help me overlay the two, and maybe based on their zoning, if their uses are conforming, get closer to their land use without even seeing. So I'm gonna say 6 months would be safe for Indiana. It could be expedited once we know more, of course, but and that would be to, I think as you said, bring you the decision, not implementing billing, right? This is, yes.
Mr. Kip? Anything? Good. Council? Thank you, Mr. Garrett.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sharon, you got any other business to attend to?
I just want to reiterate, some of what was said. This is council's first deep dive into this topic. No decisions have been made. There will be additional discussions. And I think you saw on the slides, with the current revenue streams that we have and the current expenses for street construction, street maintenance, we can't do what needs to be done to prepare or reconstruct our streets as it is right now. So there has to be adjustments made in revenue and or in expenses. So this seems to be a potential source, but there still needs to be discussion about it. And before we move forward with thing like this.
Okay. Councilmember comments.
I want to thank everybody, all the citizens that came out with their comments and concerns. They are not going on deaf ears. We had the same concerns. We've asked those questions. I hope with the presentation and answered the majority of yours. This doesn't go lightly, but something has to change. And it's on us. So thank you for coming out and voicing your concerns.
Any other council member comments?
Will there be more workshops?
I would assume yes. I would assume so. All right. Thank you for everybody. Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Thank you, Troy, for your presentations. Thanks for everyone for showing up. We'll adjourn this work session at 5:59.